So thank you for joining United Policyholders tonight for our Buy versus Rebuild webinar. With me today, Annie Barber with Team UP, Amy Ludwig with Team UP, and Neelam, who is one of our Team Up volunteers and a previous disaster survivor who's going to help us get this show on the road. And so thank you for joining us and making time out of a busy day. We hope you find this information helpful. If you'd like to download and follow the slide deck, this is where to find it. We'll also put it in the chat for you as well. A little bit about UP for those of you who are new to us. So we're a nonprofit, national nonprofit based in California. We provide insurance information and resources for consumers in all 50 states. Been doing this since the Oakland Hills wildfires in 1991 and then Hurricane Andrew in 1992. And as you can see by the tagline, not for profit, not for sale, we're funded exclusively by donations and grants. We do not take money from insurance companies. And one of the unique things about us is that volunteer corps that Neelam is a part of, where we have folks with personal and or professional expertise in disaster recovery and insurance. And then a little bit more about Team Up. So while we have a very small but mighty professional staff, we partner very heavily to do the work we do, working with government and nonprofits and faith-based partners to get the work done. And then, as I was saying, we depend very heavily on our Team Up volunteers, those previous catastrophic loss survivors who want to pay it forward. And then we also work with consumer-focused professionals, such as these professions, just to help explain that intersection between insurance and casualty tax law, the insurance claims process, construction, all of these things. We have 3 programs. Tonight is for our Roadmap to Recovery. We have our Roadmap to Preparedness, which takes those lessons learned post-disaster and shares that information to help households reduce their risk and be better resilient to disasters and adversity in the future. And then our Advocacy in Action, where we take those pain points and we fight to improve and level that playing field for consumers. We have a lot of information for you, probably more than you ever wanted to know about insurance and disaster on our Disaster Insurance Helps libraries here. So if you go to Recovery Help, that second tab will take you to our Disaster Insurance Help libraries. And these are the types of things you can find there. So lots of resources for you. Please take advantage of it. And to get us started, we're just going to talk about a few of the aphorisms we like to recommend to people. Being effective communication, just remembering that your insurance claim is a business negotiation. So you want to document it well, have a paper trail, be reasonable, be polite, confirm everything in writing. Just think about it like you're dealing with government. You want to take notes and you want to have all your ducks in a row. And understanding that just like in government, everyone has varying levels of authority, and there's usually a chain of command that you can use to your advantage as needed. That other aphorism we want to talk about is just the approach that we find works best for people to get you what you need is polite assertiveness. And so please, take advantage of those pieces of advice from other survivors to help you with that claims process. The fine print. If I can get my mouse to move, there we go. This workshop is general guidance only, not legal advice. None of us are attorneys. We don't play one on TV. We're here as educators to help you with this process. Amy, if you can please take your screen off. We don't endorse or warrant any of the sponsors listed at our website, our speakers at our workshop, but we do want to make sure that you know that you have that resources there to help. So with me today, and gotta love my mouse not working. I am the Deputy Executive Director of United Policyholders. We have Annie Barber, who is our Roadmap to Recovery Coordinator. She's also a Tubbs Fire survivor from Santa Rosa, and Neelam. And Neelam, can you pronounce your name for me? Because I am going to butcher it. I know I am.
Neelam Solman.
Thank you.
I was the Redwood Valley Fire.
Thank you. And we will fix that.
2017.
Yes.
Same time, same.
Part of the North Bay fires. Yes, we will fix that. Thank you for that. And thank you for joining us today. And just keep us going, goal of today's presentation is we're helping you explore the options for replacing your disaster destroyed dwelling. And so these are the options that we see. You can rebuild home as was, rebuild a different home, rebuild elsewhere, buy elsewhere. And those are the options that we commonly look at. And so today we're doing a deep dive really on if you're buying, what it looks like. And Annie, I will say I am not necessarily monitoring the chat. So if you see something, please pipe up. Okay, and so our topics, we're going to go through the decision process, what people have found helpful, guidance that's been shared with us by survivors. Neelam's going to tell her story and how she got to where she was, deal with the challenges faced and some helpful resources to help with that. So jumping straight into the decision process. This is when we're talking about these, you're looking at affordability. Where do those additional funds come from? The decisions you're facing and those common questions. And so when we're looking at affordability, if you're underinsured, is this the time to downsize, right? If you had that family household home and your kids are established and you don't need that 5-bedroom, 3.5-bath house because it's just you and your partner, is buying a smaller house okay? Or has your family left and you're decided that you don't necessarily want to rebuild or buy where you were, you want to buy where your family is, moving closer to where they are. And then just the reality, especially for some of the folks in the more recent disasters, thinking Maui, Annie, building code impacts on your decision. This is something Marshall Fire folks definitely faced, is, meeting those building code, that net zero requirement, is that going to impede your ability to rebuild, right? And so looking at, underinsured, which is where, from our survey data, 75% of the folks are at least in 6-digit deficit on their insurance proceeds for what it will cost to replace their home, right? And so where do those additional funds come from? And can you make that decision financially and not jeopardize your long-term financial future, right? So looking at your internal savings or your retirement account, those are things that you really don't want to deplete because you need them later. A lot of people take the personal property, the contents money, and pour it into the rebuild, Annie, which is what I believe you did when you rebuilt. Other folks take that opportunity to, when you're rebuilding or buying, you're doing a granny unit, you might buy a duplex. And so that's how you're capturing some of the money that you've lost, is you're creating a revenue and a stream from rentals, right? And just diving into that a little bit deeper, these are the decisions you're facing, right? How is this going to impact the rest of your financial future? Look where you are. Are you looking at, we've got children, with all of their expenses. We just saw the study that, having 2 children in childcare costs more than rent across the country, which is insane. But looking at college costs, is that in your near-term financial future? Conversely, are you looking at retirement and potentially medical long-term care expenses that you're needing to safeguard against? All of those are going to input into your decision of how you replace that home. And then just getting into the common questions, right, that underlay this. Were you adequately insured? If you were underinsured, how much? Do you have a mortgage? How much is owed against your house? Can you afford to buy elsewhere in this market? How far away do you need to move? If you're working and you're contemplating moving further out, is that commute going to impact your lifestyle? Can you refinance? Some people actually accept the insurance funds and become a renter or move into independent living, and where they have that Sun City style lifestyle where the facets of being a homeowner that become too much as we get older suddenly are outsourced because you're part of a community, right? And so all of those things go into this, right? And how do you decide, right? Because the reality is, while we're talking here about the financial, not all the decisions are financial. So while you want to know your insurance proceed, you're gonna need that rebuild quote, even if you're not rebuilding, right? Do you have enough to, if you were rebuilding, do you have enough to rebuild with the adjustments, right? But knowing, that rebuild quote is what is the key to getting you to the maximizing your policy. And then knowing what the tax ramifications are if you decide not to rebuild. And so one nugget of wisdom that we'll talk about here, from our Survivor series, that we had folks from the 2007 fire who basically created their own forced choice matrix for decision making, right? They were, once they got all their money, they realized they could not have it all, right? They were not going to be able to go back where they were. And so they created this decision tree tool based on a financial decision-making tool and used it to weigh their priorities as a wildfire impacted household that needed to figure out what they wanted, right? So they had their, 7 priority lists, and then, first it was 11, and then they went through and here's everything we want. Let's vote to see which are the most important things. And then at the end, they looked at it and said, okay, we got 7 out of our 11. It has 7 of the 11. They got the top 4 that flowed into their decision. But they said it was just really helpful to take the angst out of, I have to get back to where I was to make that decision, right? Just being more rational, more calm, not feeling rushed because they're already traumatized. And it's just, to be frank, it's clear as mud, right? You just want to go back to where you were and have your life that day before. And this frantic rush to get there just makes it really complicated. And I'll say for folks who have bought replacement homes, several of our volunteers have decided to move to a different state. Move out, be closer to family, or move where there's not wildfires. And then what they're finding is the wildfires come to them. So we have one family that moved to Idaho, and then 2 years later, there was a fire there. And so just being aware that where you move, there will still be climate caused risks, and just knowing that that's gonna come into it and figure out what really matters to you most.
And we had one set of couple who actually took their loss of use money and they rented a place where they thought they wanted to live. And after about 1.5 years, it became abundantly clear to them that they got a trial run and they didn't want to be there. They wanted to be back home.
Right. And just, just being aware of that. But going back, should you rebuild, for a young family, it might be easier just to buy and get back into the swing of things, right? If you have children, it really, so much of it depends on where you are in life. Are you going to leave the area in retirement? Are you planning to rebuild and stay in the community permanently? If your neighbors moved away, or, does that change the feeling of moving back? Do you want to be in that same neighborhood? All of these things flow into that decision, right? And again, just going back to, right, what are the options, right? Rebuild as was. And I'll say I've only met one person in 16 years who rebuilt the house exactly as was, even with building code. And it irritated his wife so much because they had the one drawer that when you open the dishwasher, you couldn't open the drawer all the way to put the silverware up. And don't know why they didn't move the silverware, but they didn't. And when they rebuilt the house, he did the same kitchen floor plan. So all her grand hopes of getting a new kitchen were brushed aside because she still ends up with a drawer that won't open because of the, and it's, very few people rebuild as was. It's going to be a different house, right? But rebuilding a totally different house is a different, Sarah, right? Buying elsewhere, rebuilding elsewhere, just, knowing these are your options. Because the process is really identical, right, Annie? Neelam, when you're talking, when you're thinking about what you did to buy, and Annie, you're thinking about what rebuilding, you had to have that, the estimate, you had to have the code bid because you wanted to maximize your policy. because you have to know what they owe you is how much it costs to rebuild the health you had up to policy limits, right? And so getting to that agreed upon scope of loss, right? And so this is stuff we cover previously, but for folks that have been undecided, we just want to touch on this at a light level to make sure that, you know, we're talking about those things that play into moving forward on buying a home, right? And so even unless they've offered you your max policy limit, you're still going to have to come to an agreement of how much they owe you. And so, because the amount you're owed is based upon the cost to rebuild the home you lost, plus the code upgrades up to the policy limit. Now, if you're in this situation, you know, that your estimate is higher than, you might be able to get to policy limits without a lot of hassle, right? But this really feeds back into, again, what they've given you in it already is this actual cash value. That's that partial payment you have. And then that depreciated value for your home that together equals your replacement costs. You're not going to get that until you move forward to replace that item. You don't capture that. Just like in contents, it's the same theory here, right? In Colorado, this is the bulletin that outlines what the expectations are. You know, obviously insurers prefer to hold that line that I said, but in Colorado, the Department of Insurance issued this bulletin that requested that they not require that they maximize the payout. In California, that actually is the law now. So depending on which state you're in, this is where you are. And not to touch on this, but just flagging, if you're buying a replacement home or rebuilding, you just need to talk to your CPA about the tax implications, right? So just being aware of that. Going to take a deep breath before let Neelam talk. Unfortunately, Neelam, I have Tim who was going to join us. I have his slide here of his house. So we know this is not your house, but why don't you share your story about how you ended up getting to the decision point of buying and how that worked for you?
So when I heard about the fire, I just left town the day before. In the middle of the night, I was in Indiana, heard about the fire, started talking to people, you know, in the middle of the night. And I called a builder at 7:30 in the morning and said, I don't know if my house is burnt, but I would like you to rebuild it for me. So I was, you know, certain I was going to build my house if it had burned. Well, about 10:30 that morning, I found out that my house had burned. And so I called him back and said, you're building my house. Well, you know, what man proposes, insurance companies dispose. So the insurance company, I was the adjuster's first. He was at my house a week later. Redwood Valley had been locked down and then it was open and he was right there. They were very good to start with, but then it took him months and months and months, and he would describe the house differently than how it was. I gave him the specs. It just didn't seem to be getting through to him. So, you know, just describing the house, the interior, I had pictures, I had everything. So this went on till May. I still didn't have an agreement from them that they were going to give me the full amount. And my place was underinsured, as most people's places were. And I used to sit with my insurance agent every 3 years or so and review my policies. But, you know, prices went up. The fire happened and replacement costs went out of sight. So part of it was not their problem. Part of it was the market, but I was underinsured. So anyway, these guys, so my neighbor, who was a good friend of the builder, her company was very good. They paid her very, very fast. And she started building, and I couldn't hold him back. He needed to start on hers. And I said, I'll do it after you're done with him. Anyway, it took so long. I had a very unpleasant experience with my insurance company. I settled with them. I got the money. I left the country, came back, and my family was like, you know what, don't build a house. You're going to go crazy. Buy a house. Well, I came back. There were no builders available. The builder I was going to use was not going to be available for another 6 months. And I started looking for houses. I found a house. I was lucky to find a house. There was not much for sale, and I jumped on it right away. I did remodel a little bit, and I'm in it. It's much smaller than my home was. But what I got from the insurance would in no way have replaced my home. But then, as someone mentioned just now, that we, you know, I'm single now. I don't need the big house I had. So this works for me. My two neighbors rebuilt. One had a very good builder who did an extremely good job. The other one didn't. So you really have to watch these people. They, you know, sometimes they've just got so many jobs, they're not paying attention. Sometimes they're trying to take advantage of the situation. So when you go into building, you have to be on top of them. You have to be very vigilant. But then you can also end up getting exactly what you want when you build, when you rebuild. You know, you can have things the way you want, the finishes you want, the layout you want. So that is a positive there. You have to weigh both, you know, both sides. In my case, it did make sense for me to buy a house rather than build. And so that's my story.
It's a great story.
It took a little long.
No, not at all. Not at all.
But one thing I want to tell you, my insurance company started being the sweetest, nicest people. Please don't let them fool you into that. They're not your friends. And I fell for that. And then I realized as we went along, they were fighting, giving me my ADLs. You know, they were fighting on everything. You know, they had to supply a furnished place, and I needed things. I mean, they fought every $20, $40, $50. And finally, I got so tired, and I was telling everybody else, don't let them take advantage of you. But I got so tired, I, you know, offered to settle with them. I can't talk about the settlement, but let's say I did not come out as well as I should have. But I was so tired of them. I was so tired. And the night I settled with them, I signed the papers. I slept all night for the first time in a year. So, you know, that was worth something to me, I guess.
Absolutely.
But they're not your friends. They are absolutely not your friends.
No, very true. So I rebuilt my house. And I think like a lot of survivors, the fire happens. You didn't choose to sell your house, so you feel like it was taken from you. And there's that. The only way I can describe it is that right there in the center of your chest is that anxiety that creeps up when you're not moving forward and you're not sure how it's going to work out, right? And I think that we all have it, unfortunately. And all I could think was, I want my house back. I never even entertained the idea of not rebuilding. I can tell you now, I'm 62 years old, and if my house burnt down again, I would go buy a house someplace else, because I know the toll that it takes as you get older on you to go through a build. And some people slide right through them and they get a really good contractor and it's an amazing experience. But in the big picture, you're so traumatized, and as I get older, I think, how many years of my life do I want to work on recovering? So, as Valerie was saying, it may be an opportunity. Maybe your kids have moved out of town and you want to go live by them. You kind of have to take a deep breath and take your time making the decision. Keep working your insurance, but take a deep breath and actually utilize all of the tools to make the decision that makes the most sense for you.
Well, thank you for that. And I, by moving the slides, I was just, we were on the starting point. Just to recap, as Annie said, you're looking at that cost and you just want to get home, whatever home is going to be. But just that reminder of, when you're replacing a home by buying, just like rebuilding, the measure of what you're owed is still all the costs that would have been incurred if you had replaced it with the same size home with the same features and the upgrades to go to code, right? These are all funds that are supposed to be available to you towards the purchase.
And I'm going to add to that, that, we all want to go home. And even the home that you build is not the home that you lost. It's really a weird thing. You go back home, it's a different floor plan. It's an open floor plan. So just know you can't recreate what you lost. It's your new normal and it's okay, but you just need to recognize that. So whether you buy or you rebuild, you have the same situation. The difference is that if you rebuild, you may have your same neighbors.
Yeah. And that's a good point. So with the exception of the gentleman who wanted the the problematic kitchen so he could still get up out of bed and walk through the house and not stumble over everything, it's not going to feel the same. Even if you rebuilt the exact same house, it's not your home yet. It's a house that you're moving back into. And so just to go on this, all right, so presenting your insurer with those costs, coming to an agreement on what that cost is. Now you're looking to find a home that would cost at least as much as you have to rebuild, right? And then you're going to present that real estate documentation to your insurer. And then from Lee Lehrman, this is some guidance from them, from another North Bay family. 5 years after the fire, they didn't regret selling the lot and buying. Annie, it's like you said, that impulse to find a home was overwhelming, and they said they didn't choose well. And so she felt that they should have waited another year because she's in a house that doesn't suit. She knows others who did the same. And so, being aware in your financial situation, do you lock yourself into something that you can't afford and can't afford to get rid of either? Now, Neelam, for you, I was going to say, how does that hit you?
This is really interesting. There were no houses in Ukiah. There were very few houses available. And my husband was a builder and he was a craftsman. And our house was built by him, which I knew, someone would not be able to replicate. But anyway, one of the houses he had built, I was out of the country, came up for sale. And I wanted to buy that house. And my son said, I said, but they've redone the kitchen. I don't know what it looks like. He said, have someone look at it and buy it. And I said, no, I have to look at it. Well, that house sold within a week. When I came back, like I said, there was nothing available. And my realtor showed me this house and I thought, you know what, grab it before anybody else does, because there's nothing, it's in great shape. It's a good neighborhood. It wasn't the one I wanted, but it was a good neighborhood. So I grabbed it. I made an offer that evening And I said she had to give me an answer the next morning because I didn't want anyone else coming in. So I got the house. But till today, I miss my bedroom. My husband had built me, it was an add-on. We had extended the most beautiful bedroom. I mean, it was just beautiful. It was big, it was lovely. And now I've got a tiny little bedroom and I can't expand. That was the first thing I looked at trying to do. Can't expand the way the house is laid out. So, you know, you miss things. And then for 6 months after I bought this house, I went to every open house to assure myself that I made the right decision. I had. For 6 months, I didn't find. Now there have been houses that have come up, but I keep asking myself at this age, do I want to move again and resettle and, you know, any house you move into, you want to redo things the way you want it. And so I haven't moved, but yeah, I'm very comfortable, but I miss my bedroom.
Well, and that's the hard part. And so I know we have a question in chat. Actually, that leads us right into our next section, which is challenges. So first is going to be, you know, differences between that insurance company and the contractor's estimate, getting like kind and quality. You know, if you had a pool before it and it was insured, the funds from that should carry over. Your code upgrades, land valuation is always very tricky. We'll talk about that in a minute. So let's look at those soft costs, right? So some insurers tend to say that because they would have paid them as incurred, right? It's their process, right? And if it's not spelled out in your policy language, you know, that's part of the negotiation, right? Then that question, when they tell you they can't do something, ask them always politely, persistently, can you show me where in my policy it said it says that you don't pay this? And if they tell you it's their process or their system, that's up for negotiation. Your policy is a legal contract. This is a negotiation. And so if they're saying that, they're owed to you, whether they're part of the replacement, because they are part of the replacement cost. And it shouldn't matter whether you buy or rebuild. You're saying, I am replacing my home, because that's generally what the language in your insurance policy says, repair or replace. If it's a total loss, you can replace it totally you don't have to rebuild it to do it, but they still owe you those funds. And then we're getting into like, kind, and quality. So if you buy a home that has extra, you know, they owe you for what they have. And if you have determined that that quality is going to be, you're going to buy something like lesser kitchen and you're going to remodel that kitchen to bring it up to your standard. But, you know, being aware of this, you don't have to replace with like, kind, and quality, whether you're buying or rebuilding. And so this is a common challenge with adjusters. And so we're going to talk about this with the code upgrades, but it also has the language for if you're buying or building in a new location, right? California code protects that right to rebuild at a new location or purchase an already built home at a new location, but they owe you all of these funds, right? So that's in California law. If they're saying we'll let you buy in the state, but you can't buy out of state, again, the law says I can do a new location. It does not define a new location in the state of California. There is no limitation in the regulation, okay? In Colorado, so two things, you know, the bulletin for the insurers that came from the Department of Insurance, the issue we having for the Marshall Fire specifically is that protection, which very much mirrors what is on the books in California. We were actually in the process of working with the insurance commissioner to draft this proposed bill that passed and became the law at the time the Marshall Fire hit. So while it technically does not apply to Marshall Fire losses, it establishes what Colorado lawmakers expect from insurers. And again, just because they're telling you that they won't, if it's not in the policy saying you are limited to rebuilding in your state or buying a replacement home in your state, it is up for negotiation, and this is one of your negotiation tools. Anything to add to that? I know I get a little cranky in this instance because I feel that blanket of oh, well, we don't do that. First, go up to their, let me speak to your supervisor. Let's go up the chain of command. The other tool that you have, depending on which disaster you're in, if there are so if you're in Colorado specifically, you have an insurer in your and that your insurer is saying you can't do something, go on your Slack channel and see who has bought a replacement home with your insurer. Because if you can find they have done that for someone else, then you have grounds to say, I know you've made an exception for this in the past with my disaster.
Yeah,
When we used to have just like one fire and not like in California, for you folks in California, just to be clear, when we had just the Tubbs fire or the Camp Fire or something where we would do a roadmap there versus 20 fires in one state at the same time. When we would meet in person for a roadmap, you would do that networking to make those connections after our meetings. We'd break people into insurance groups. So you could do these swapping stories and, and support each other in this. So we don't have that right now, but you do reach out to, if you've got a communication group with your survivors in your community, please take advantage of that. And Annie, I know you were still talking on it. My mouse is moving along.
You're good. So on our Survivor to Survivor, which we have once a month, we deal with a lot of this where other survivors chime in and share what worked for them in those kind of situations. But getting together with your neighbors, not only is it therapeutic for you emotionally, but it is a wealth of information because insurance, each insurance company changes in a lot of cases the way that they operate from fire to fire, from disaster to disaster. And sometimes they're easier to navigate than others. So if you can find someone who is actually impacted in the same way you are, and have had a challenge and succeeded, that's like money in your pocket.
Yeah.
Utilize that.
And then,
Sorry.
go ahead.
I want to bring one thing up, and this was very interesting. It was very early in the game. We kept having meetings in Redwood Valley, and the county people were there. We had feds over there. People were talking to us, and this was the second meeting. And there was a man sitting at this table that I came to sit at. And I turned to him, I said, "Are you from Redwood Valley?" He said, "No," he was from the insurance commissioner's office. He gave me his card. He was like the number 2 or number 3 person right under the insurance commissioner. And I was talking to him. I said, I had all these really nice things in my house, and how do they value it, this, that, and the other. And he said, they'll be able to. But he said to me very early, he said, "Get a lawyer." And I said, "Oh no," I said, "I don't want an adversarial relationship. My insurance is really good." And anyway, he heard me out. When the meeting was over, he said goodbye, and his last words were, "Get a lawyer." Well, I didn't get a lawyer. I thought, why should I get a lawyer? I can talk to these people. He was right. But later in the thing, I bumped into a friend who was a lawyer. I've got several lawyer friends, but she had been out of town, had just moved into town, and we started talking, told her what happened. And she insisted I go to this one lawyer. I went to him. I'm getting to where I'm. Look, the first thing he said to me was, "Do you have a second home?" And I said, "Yes." He said, "Bring me your policy." In that policy, my insurance company hadn't told me this at all. If you have a second home, there's a certain amount, 10% of contents, that goes over to you, to your house. So I got 10% more. And they never told me this. And when I brought it up, the adjuster was really snippy. She said, "What are you talking about?" And then she said, "It's going to take us time to calculate this." I said, "Calculate 10% of something?" I said, "You don't need a calculator for that. You can figure What happened? Uh-oh.
I think just your light went off. We can
No,
see.
that was PG&E, yeah.
Yeah,
Oh,
Neelam, you're
Right,
still on. Yeah, you're still on. Yeah.
Okay, so anyway, I got a whole bunch of money that the insurance company never told me about, and mind you, all my policies were with this company. And nobody, now maybe we didn't check everything, but it was interesting. Had I not gone to that lawyer, I would have never found that money. That would
Exactly. Yeah.
never have been paid.
Well, and that's why the networking and the relationships and the education are very key
Yeah,
here.
so anyone with a second home, please look into that.
All right, let me touch on ordinance and law payouts, so the building code upgrades. You should be able to get them. We have a sample, we have a publication on it. And then we have a sample letter for getting you that information. Land value is complicated depending on your state. And so again, we go back to ask where it states in the policy that they are not going to pay for the land of the house you're buying. And so, because remember, we've got an example that'll talk about this, but the home you want to buy, you're making a purchase to replace your home using only the insurance proceeds for the home you had. Remember, you still own that lot. You're asking for the cost of the lost home. It's not a windfall, which is the argument a lot of them make. It's actually you're downgrading. And so in California specifically, this was the third attempt. So I know after the 03 survivor, after 03 fires in California, they passed it where you could buy a replacement home. No issue with the land valuation. By the time Annie's fire rolled around, it was a problem and people were fighting for it. And then they rolled through and fixed it. And then the legislature had to fix it again. So hopefully the third time is a charm. It seems to be working now, saying there is no land value deduction. But this is what it is, right? So when you purchase the home, you're just purchasing that structure, right? They are only covering the structure, not the land. So if your home was $4,000, right? We go with the $4,000 home. When you buy a replacement home, you're taking that $4,000 from the home to buy a home in the land. So this house here, and I'm sorry, it's hard to see with the colors. This is 300,000 and 100,000, right? Easy numbers. Because this house that you've bought with your insurance proceeds from that house is worth less than the $4,000 just for the home, right? So, so you fully expended the money, and it's worth less because you've bought the land under that house as well. So that's not an undue enrichment. That's not a windfall. You are actually at this point losing money on the house because you had a house and land that was valued here, and you haven't replaced this house with a $400,000 house, right? You've replaced it with a $300,000 house and the land underneath. And then this is this is hard because when you're arguing with someone about your home, your safe space, it's very deeply emotional. So these are words of wisdom from one of our volunteers, Ken Klein, who was an 03 Cedar Fire survivor. But it's really words to take to heart in this negotiation, right? As Neelam said, I thought I would be able to talk to them. And what you want is that empathetic, sympathetic. And for them, it's a business deal. It's a decision. All of these, you have to put the emotions over here, save that for friends, family, the punching bag, if you're going to that axe throwing place, save your emotions for there. Because the more you resist allowing emotions into the decision-making process, the better it turns out. Because when you're emotional, it gets in the way of getting to this is what you owe me, you know, and if you get upset, it's viewed as a weakness. And so trying, you know, polite persistence and all of that. For helpful resources, just to touch on these really quickly, combining coverages, this is in California only. You basically get to capture all of the other categories, and you can combine them. So there's no issue of, you know, think replacement costs, you know, if you didn't replace your other structures, right? Because you're buying a replacement home and they're saying, well, you didn't, you know, you had a pool and a gazebo and you didn't replace that here, so we don't owe you that money. Yes, you do, and I can use without hesitation all of those combined funds to buy my replacement home. Because that's another one of those challenges people would have is, well, I don't owe you this unless you replace this, you know, hot tub or whatever it is, right? And so this is just a caveat in California specifically. Reminder, you know, the tools we have for you at UP, your, you know, our little yellow book, our Survivor Speak series, as Annie was saying earlier, our Survivor to Survivor Forum. Annie, can you please share when and a little bit more about that? I know you've spoken about it briefly.
Yeah, we have it once a month on Zoom. Our next date, I'm going to look up real quick, but you know, we just get together for about an hour and a half and we talk about our wins and our losses. We talk about whatever challenges. Sometimes we talk about triggers, quite frankly. You know, what is it that with all these fires going on right now, how are you feeling? And I moderate it, but in the big picture of things, I just keep it on track. It's really survivor to survivor, and they get to come together, and I'm a survivor also, so it's a safe space to just, you know, if someone has a question about how to deal with something and someone else has some ideas or something that worked, they may step into a breakout room and learn how the best way to go about it. Trying to look at our Survivor to Survivor is July 16th, 4 o'clock Hawaiian time, 7 o'clock Pacific time, and 8 o'clock Mountain time. You can go on our website just like you did for here, and you can sign up. And I look forward to welcoming anybody who'd like to join us.
Thank you. And so next screen I have is for upcoming events. You can just go to events on the website, register there. Reminder, if when you're asking, can you show me where in my policy, and you're getting denied, delayed, dismissed. How about that, Dee? You know, feel free to reach out to your Department of Insurance, your Division of Insurance, to ask for assistance with that. If you're not getting a straight answer back and you've gone up the chain of command as high as you can and you're still not getting an answer, ask them to weigh in with you.
Yeah.
It's definitely it's a resource worth using. As Neelam said, you might need professional help, but you know, there's no harm in reaching out for free help at the beginning of any of this issues. So this is for Colorado, the Division of Insurance, California here. I've already done the slide for our events. One other space to just, if you've got a question specifically, please feel free to use our Ask an Expert forum. It's free, it's private for you, you can say that, but it allows you to get answers from our team up professional volunteers across the country to help you get the answers you need. Be it on mortgage issues, construction, real estate, you name it, we'll find you the expert. I will say it's not a quick answer. So what you cannot do is put in a question and say, I have to answer my insurance company back on this thing in 2 days. It's not going to be that quick. You know, if you're under those constraints, this is not the resource for you. This is time for a thoughtful answer from a very busy expert that we're working to get for you. All right. And then just a call out, thank you to our funders that allow us to be here to do the work. Redwood Credit, excuse me, no, oh, Lord help me, Annie. RCRC, Golden State Finance Authority, and Boulder County Community Foundation. I am so not here. My apologies for the mistake there. Let me stop sharing my screen. And thank you all for joining us. And last chance for any questions. We appreciate you joining us. And if you have any questions, please let us know. And we hope everybody stays safe, stays cool, and as cool as you can, I guess. And good luck with everything, and have a good evening.